Today's speaker is Professor Dr. Laila L. Vijayan. Professor Dr. Laila Vijayan is a communicant member of the Church of South India, South Kerala Diocese. Laila received BCom degree from Kerala University and theological education, 1-year diploma from Attingal Bible School, Bachelor of Divinity and Master of Theology of Senator Srambur through Gurukul Lutheran Theological College, and Doctor of Theology from Senator Srambur College. Presently, Laila L. serves as the Professor of Biblical Studies in Old Testament at United Theological College, Bengaluru. Before this, Laila L. served as Bible Women 1999 to 2000 in South Kerala Diocese of Church of South India, lecturer in Kerala United Theological Seminary from 2000 to 2004, and Calcutta Bible Seminary 2007 to 2008, assistant professor from 2008 to 2011, and associate professor from 2012 to 2017 in Srambur College. Since 2017, Laila is serving at United Theological College as a professor of biblical studies. A warm welcome to Professor Dr. Laila L. Vijayan and all the participants. Over to Laila L. Vijayan.
Thank you, and good evening to all of you. I express my sincere gratitude and thanks to Professor Dr. Matthew Kaushik Nakad, Director, the Department of Ecological Concerns, for inviting me to be a part of this endeavor. I always feel I also express thanks to all members who works behind. It's been after a long break. Probably I'm getting into a new field. When I say new field, it has always been the heart during my theological education and also as part of ministry. But getting connected with the church is very limited. I always feel disturbed when I know that the life situation which I am placed either in Calcutta for 10 years and here now in Bangalore, which makes me feel that I am deprived of the close contact with my childhood days, the childhood place, the places where I have experienced the interconnectedness, the close affinity with the land and with the creation. Monday night, I think it was around 12 o'clock or around 12:30, I heard the sound of frog croaks. And there was no sign the whole day. It was a very sunny day. And then at midnight, when I heard, I was remembered of how parents used to tell us, or our childhood stories, where when we hear the sound of this frog croak, there is a possibility of rain. And I saw yesterday there was no rain, but it was almost cloudy. And I feel disturbed because the message, the informations, the learning which I had in connection with the field, the cultivation of the land, all that I don't think my children are able to experience because of our city living or maybe staying within the walls of the campus. Once again, thanks to all members who are connected with this program. 2 texts have been assigned to me, and one of the texts which is under the book of Psalms, and another one is the Song of Songs. As you had the last week class with the book of Psalms, I will continue today first with a short reflection from Psalm number 104, a celebration of Manua, written by Arthur Walker Jones. An analysis of Psalm number 104 Then I'll move towards the Song of Songs. When I look onto the Psalm number 104, as a biblical scholar, we also assigned this psalm to a creation psalm, a psalm which talks about the nature, and so called it's a nature psalm. It's also called as a hymn of praise. When we say the hymn of praise, it can be a declarative psalm or it can be a descriptive psalm. So here this psalm number 104 is a descriptive psalm. The whole essence of creation is described in psalm number 104. It's a very lengthy psalm which talks about each and every element what we see, experience in this universe. So in this Australian as well as in the Asian readings, they have tried to identify this text for their reading. And in that reading, where the A.W. Jones identified the term Vanua. If you look on to the Google search, you will see Vanua or Banua. It is identified as land. So I take it in for easy pronunciation. I have taken this word as land or earth, or it can also be seen as a village. So therefore, when we look into this particular article written by Jones, he says the term Vanua can be seen from the perspective of three different angles. That is, one is physical, second is social, and the third element is cultural. So when we say physical, it refers to, it may be a geographical location, a person's village, or it can be a district, or it can be a country, or it can refer to farmland, forest, or fishing grounds, birds, animals, vegetation, and so on. So the physical is referring to the normal understanding of just the land and also the geographical place and all the elements within that. But when we look at with the connotation of social, it refers to the small group of people, or it may be referring to a small group inside the land, inner part of the land. The cultural connotation refers to the beliefs, values, and the practices of the people of a particular place. People of some traditions believe that the spirits of ancestors and ancestral gods are present and active in the land. When we say within the biblical tradition also, we see sometimes why the people of Israel were trying to worship the other gods of the land, because of the influence of the ancient West Asian traditions or the cultures or the text. There is a kind of belief which go along with even at some places of the Indian context, where the people feels that when they enter into a new land, they have to satisfy the spirits of this land. It can be a particular small land, or it can be a land which is referring to a wider place of village, district, etc. So they feel that there is a belief which the spirits of the ancestors or the gods of the ancestors are present and active in the land, and they needs to be satisfied. Jones writes that the natural events such as cyclones are interpreted as the result of the human sin or injustice. What I'm trying to do it for the next 1 hour, I'm just trying to give you how the two different scholars, and in Song of Songs, the other two scholars, and for Psalm 104, this Jones, how they have tried to present it, with an addition of how I try to see it in the Indian context. The people from different states and different dioceses are attending this meeting. And you will know that when we have different kinds of natural calamities happens in our context, there is a detailed discussion which takes place in the wider media, social media, that tries to affirm why this natural calamity has happened, especially to the flood, cyclones, landslides, and at least in some context where people try to have a wider discussion because of the human activities. When I say the human activities or human actions, it can be the mining, it can be the industrialization, the developments, which can make an after effect into the land and to the earth. So therefore, John's tried to look into the context of the Asia and tries to make the statement saying there is the cyclones can be interpreted as the result of human sin or injustice. This term can also refer to the physical and social environments or to the supernatural world. What John's trying to explain, the celebrations expose the cooperation, the mutual support, and kinship connections in the land and the earth. When I read this article, the picture which comes to my mind, maybe around 20-25 years back, when the harvest takes place in the paddy field, the people continue to sing together when they try to cut the paddy, and also when they do the weaving and taking of the gains. In all this time, they continue to enjoy. It's a mood of celebrations, and that celebration, I do not know how far it is still there when it is replaced with the industrialization and with the modern technology and equipments. The eco-justice principle tries to reaffirm the interconnectedness between the elements within the land. But John says it goes beyond an understanding of ecological interconnectedness to a personal feeling of identification and the relationships. By developing the kinship relationship to the earth or land, it can function in resistance to exploitation. It can function as a resistance to exploitation. This ecological science understanding of the web of life provides resources for resisting environmental destruction. So Jones rejects the positive aspect of dominant culture and the negative aspects of the subject culture. Instead of this dualistic approach, Jones says all elements are mutually interrelated and interdependent in the web or system of life. So in order to express the idea of a celebration of the land or the celebration of Vanwa, where Psalm 104 is used, each verse by verse as a strophe, around 4 verses together and then further explained on it. And in that explanation, he tries to present God in earth and God as earth. That is the first point which he tries to explain. So when he tried to expose the interconnectedness, which can also make a part in the web of life, which can also create a resistance to destruction. And there, the first aspect which is brought out from Psalm 104, God in earth and God as earth. Often, even in our church traditions, even in our understandings, we try to see in each and every element the divine power. We look into the creation, especially like if you remember of Psalm number 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament affirms, proclaims God's handiwork. So in every element of it, we try to see either God's glory, God's presence, God's revelation. But what John is trying to say, God is earth. God is in the earth. God as earth. Within the earth itself, that dualism of separating as divine or spiritual versus ancestral or temporary, that is challenged. So do we see God in earth, or are we tuned to the teachings of Western theologies that God is separated from the nature? God is in heaven, God is supernatural, that's spiritualizing of the element. In other words, the Christian God is a spiritual God, and the ancestral gods are temporal or worldly gods. And they are represented in a person of chief among the people. When we say this one, especially into the tribal culture and the traditions, where the chief who is representing as the elder or the one who is in charge of the tribal system, there they try to see that they are the representative or not exactly the incarnation, but a representative selected by the ancestral gods, a person who carries the spirit of ancestors. So that element is more clear with the indigenous traditions, and it is taken away by the Western teachings and the theologies. So the temporal advantages are often said it as prosperity and fertility. And in some indigenous communities, during the ceremonies, they pray both to the Christian God and to the ancestral gods. The communities who follow the traditional religions feel that the ancestral gods are more accessible and present in the land or in the earth. In the biblical text, the scholars identify the influence of Canaanite tradition or mythologies. In other words, the influence of ancient West Asian texts. For example, the thunder is identified as the voice of God. The trembling of earth as the storm theophany. The storm imageries are God is wrapped in the light, chariots as clouds, and ride on the wings of the wind. So when we try to see these elements, Google also connect the Hebrew Bible with the Mesopotamian myth Enuma Elish. That means there is a battle against the chaos, which is also connected within the biblical tradition. Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, the earth was formless and void, the primeval chaos. And Hans Joachim Kraus calls it as the conquest of primeval flood. What I'm trying to say along with the Johns, within the biblical tradition, the ideas which is reflected within the biblical text also connect with the influence of the Canaanite or the ancient West Asian text or the Mesopotamian text. The mythological elements are also merged or found within the text. There is an also influence of an Egyptian hymn, that is about the sun, connecting with Psalm number 19. So according to the language and content, John's divide the Psalm 104 under three headings. Here, the metaphor or the imagery used is the battlefield. It is a battle. So therefore, the metaphor used is march, battle, and the monarchy. That means the monarch, as the representative God, established order and fertility, and the hand of God ruled over the water of chaos. We often say the creation, which is considered to be from the chaos to the order. So God made from the chaos, and the creation has brought forth into an order. And when we look into the different traditions, we also see there is a watery chaos. So in the given article, the author says the Fijians consider the sea snakes as their ancestors. And even though they know it is a poisonous one, but still they allow their children to play with them. That means because they believe that there is an ancestral spirit in the snakes. In the Indian context, people who live on the seashore know, I'm using the word used by Jones as the ugly verbs, the moods of the sea, ugly moods of the sea, but they identify the home as it is the daily source of survival and food for them. So the monarch and the war are directly not present in Psalm 104. There is a connection which was made in the biblical text about the Leviathan. And in Psalm number 104, it says, the Leviathan is enjoying and it laughs and plays. So Leviathan is not an enemy of God. It is a fellow creature made to laugh and play. In ancient West Asian texts, sun, moon, fire, flame, etc. are the personification of different divine entities. But in the biblical tradition, all are God's creation. There is no personification of God. Instead, all are God's creation and part of the universe and the cosmos. But the Western interpretations try to present the ideas with the dualisms, and so God and earth are seen with separation. So therefore, John's calls that it is to identify for a more closer and a friendlier relationship within the earth's community. It's a call to identify a closer and a friendlier relationship within the earth community where God is in earth and God as earth. In the psalm, it clearly talks about the fertility and life. Wasserman argues that the identification of the theme of salvation, which neglects the aspect of blessing. So blessing refers to fertility and it leads to prosperity and success. But when we talk about the salvation, about the singular intervention of God, but when we talk about the blessing, it is an ongoing process. The blessing speaks of ongoing and the providential care by God. So Psalm 104 talks about the providential care of God, water, food, shelter, and the spirit of life. That means God is present in earth as spirit. When we look on the Psalm, that death is not viewed as evil. It is a natural part of the cycle of life. And then people can see God's involvement in the cycle of life. The cycles of seasons and generations are viewed like inhaling and exhaling of God. Inhaling and exhaling of God. God is present in the earth as a spirit, providing blessing, fertility, and life. Comparison can be seen from Genesis chapter 3, verse 17 following. As you have the document, the source material sent to you, kindly look on there where the comparison between Genesis chapter 3, verse 17 onwards with the comparison of a curse versus blessing. What we see in Genesis chapter 3 is a negative aspect of it, which is totally diversified, changed in Psalm number 104. curse is turns into a blessing and the destruction to a creation. Psalm number 104 claims that the presence of Israel God in the land is the source of life. Earth provides water and food, and it sustains the life. So the first aspect which Arthur Walker Jones explains is earth, God in earth, and God as earth. The second element is earth as alive, interconnected, interdependent, and intrinsically valuable. It is interconnected, interdependent, and intrinsically valuable. Earth as alive. So in this psalm, the earth is the main actor or element along with the diverse characters. Often we try to assume God as the main source and then all other characters as the sub-characters or maybe supplementing characters or the supportive characters. But here it is God is an unnamed subject of the sum of the words, but earth is the main subject of the verb and clauses. So the question raised here is whether the principle of mutual custodianship is it applicable. This is one of the principles of the hermeneutics. Is it the principle of mutual custodianship applicable? And then John says, every element on the earth has an identity and life. Every element in the earth has an identity and life. The relationship between earth and human are not mutual in Psalm number 104. Instead, humanity is just one species, one among the other species, and plays a small part in the psalm. So human beings are more dependent on the earth. So when often we use the Genesis narration of the dominion and the subdue, and we say often the human beings in the earlier times, I hope nowadays nobody will say that. Earlier times, around 10 years back and 15 years back, people used to say that for a long time, it has been said it as the human beings as the crown of creation, at the apex of the creation, placing human beings at the top under the hierarchy structure. But then now we continue to affirm and say human beings are the part of creation and also a species, one among the other species and elements on the earth. And therefore, human beings depend on the earth. Psalms reminds the cycle of rain and the role of the mountains, valleys, rivers, wild animals, birds, trees, and human beings, and all share the same resources with other organisms. Human beings are dependent on earth as the earth provides food, wine, and oil for the humanity's physical and the mental being. Earth and the many of inhabitants have independent intrinsic worth. Psalm 104 attributes that the spirit and the wisdom of God. It is the spirit and the wisdom of God. Psalm 104 gives the picturization as earth is alive, wind as messengers, flame and fire as servants, springs, water, wild animals, birds sing, earth is satisfied, and grass sprout for the cattle and herbs for the humanity. The list continues. The detailed list is given in the article. Earth is full of living beings and all things are animate or inanimate, including the earth itself is alive. So if we analyze each element in the psalm, the psalmist affirms that it suggests a diverse, interdependent, and interconnected earth community the psalmist affirms or suggests a diverse, interdependent, and interconnected earth community. The third direction which John's explained, that is earth celebrates. Earth celebrates. Praying, fasting, feasting, and singing. Praying, feasting, and singing are the characteristics of the celebrations in any community. When John's writes in the Australian community or in the context of the Fijians who use the word Vanwa, or to the Australasian languages who use the word Vanwa, for them, they also try to see that in any celebrations of any community, praying, feasting, and singing as the characters. This celebration is clearly picturized in Psalm 104. The terms like eating, drinking, praying, and praising are the expressions of celebrations. Beauty, humor, and celebrations also accompany the prayer and celebration. Food, oil, and wine are the produce of the earth, and they make the people happy. They strengthen and gladden human hearts and make their faces shine. So once again, the John tries to reaffirm and say, Leviathan laughs and play in the sea. That is little different from what it is explained in the other passages of the Bible. The last section of the psalm gives the idea that the earth with its numerous and diverse inhabitants is the main character in the psalm. Where do we identify the voice of the earth in Psalm number 104? When the psalmist explains, do we go along with the psalmist with the common notion of the self-revelation of God in creation or self-manifestation of God in creation, or when we try to do an ecological reading, applying of the principles of the earth community, can we see any voice of the earth? And therefore, John's tried to explain that there is an I. The last section of the psalm gives the idea that earth with its numerous and diverse inhabitants is the main character in the psalm. So earth is the main character, and I could be identified as the voice of the earth. Or I is a person who speaks on behalf of abundant and diverse life of the earth community. Abundant and diverse life of the earth community. There is an imperative call to praise. If the call of the earth to God to join the celebration and ask God to rejoice in earth. So there is an element of interconnectedness where people try to spiritualize at the same time to place it into the other context. Essentially, it is there's a call of the earth to God to join in the celebration and ask God to rejoice in earth. Earth rejoices in God, which means earth community includes God and rejoices together. So Psalm number 104 ends with a final call that God and earth sing together. The God and the earth sing together a song that rejoices in abundant life and resists the exploitation. It's a call to rejoice in the abundant life without exploitation, without injustice to the creation, without injustice to the earth. It is a resist to the exploitation. To conclude the first portion of the talk, the Western dualisms between God and nature. humanity and nature are absent. Every element in the land are interrelated, and the humans are one aspect of the earth community and a dependent part of the earth. God is identified with a friendlier relationship with the earth. There is an element of mutual custodianship, which John's earlier challenged, and interconnectedness of all things. Earth is capable of speaking and resisting human injustice. Earth is capable of speaking and resisting the human injustice. Psalm 104 give a call to remove the sinners who exploit and kill the earth community, and to recognize the earth community breathing, drinking, eating, praying, and singing together. It's a call to rejoice in abundant life, and it's a call to resist in exploitation. That is where I put a hold on with the first section. It's a continuation of the previous one, probably trying to call identifying with John's, with the idea of looking into the earth community and the earth and a challenge to the common notion of dualisms. As there is a time limitation, therefore, I would like to move on without giving enough time for queries or discussions. Probably if the time permits, I'll come back after finishing the second section. I'm also trying to look into the Song of Songs. As we know, this may be the different ways of understanding onto the Song of Songs. And maybe first time speaking to an audience whom I have not met earlier, whom I have not spoken earlier. And preferably majority of members are the ordained priests. We often see the Song of Songs is explained from the point of allegorical presentations, allegorical interpretations, where people try to not to see the idea of a love poetry within the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs can be identified as a love poetry. Often we listen to the sermons at times during the weddings, but even in the weddings, the people have tried to take into different levels of metaphorical interpretations. And sometimes this book is referred as Song of Songs or a Song of Solomon. Technically, it is Song of Songs. And in the article, it is referred as in the songs, not with a full text name. And this book has a very speciality of it. And it is the speaker of the book often identified, or the feminist scholars try to identify as the female speaker. And we see the text talks about the domestic relationship, the private sentiments, and the interpersonal discourse, and also the human affections. And we see in the Song of Songs, the relationships are private, that is the relationship between the lover and the woman, the man and woman, the conversation between the intimates, the words like a darling, beloved, friend, and the language hints the kinship bonds of mother, sister, brother, daughter. And this book has the specialty like the book of Esther. The divine name is not found in the first 8 chapters. But in spite of that, often our interpretations goes with allegorical interpretation of the Christians, which try to say us waiting for the church as the bride and the beloved. And by keeping this background in our minds. As this has been a part of ecological reading, I would like to go back into the two articles which is given there for your reading. One is go forth into the fields, an earth-centered reading of the Song of Songs. Go forth into the fields, an earth-centered reading of the Song of Songs, and also an eco-delight of the Song of Songs. The first article is written by Carol R. Fontaine. And when I just read the first one, go forth into the fields, the first thing came to my mind, not placing onto the Song of Songs, what I have seen maybe around 25 or 30 or 35 years back in my childhood days, going into the fields, which is surrounded with the paddy field and the different cultivations, and half of it has gone now, and half of it now, majority of them with only with the banana plantations. The imagery which comes with this article, I as an Indian reader, when we go into the fields, depends upon your geographical location, your imagery, and the picturization which comes to your mind may differ. If you are in a situation of born and brought up and living in a situation of the city life, or maybe urbanized areas, not in the rural context, then going to the fields may give a different picture. But to the Song of Songs, the picturization of go forth into the fields, it gives the picturization of the agricultural and the pastoral fields, where the shepherd imageries are there, the agricultural field of wheat, the agricultural field of wine, vineyards, orchards, oil, all these imageries are filled within the metaphorical presentation of the Song of Songs. With that introduction, I would also want to reaffirm and just repeating of what the Fontaine has tried to explain, and some of the detailed explanation given in the article about the sexual intimacy between the two persons. That is given in the article. I have tried to incorporate some of the elements, but some of the elements I have left it for your reading and for a comparison to look onto the text. I will urge you to read the Song of Songs before you read the article given onto the text. And also after reading the article, again, you can do a comparison to study by reading the Bible, the Song of Songs. So Song of Songs is a very unique book in the Old Testament. Fontaine explains about the three imageries in the imaginative field. In the three imageries, one is the court imagery, and the second one is the family imagery, and the third one is the nature imagery. Court imagery, court metaphors, family imagery, and the nature imagery. The images, or I have put it as metaphors, are used to communicate the message. In this process, when a metaphor or an image is used, through the known facts, less known or unknown facts or message is communicated easily. Fontaine says that the unknown becomes known by the usage of metaphors. One example which is given within the text, I do not know what goes into all of your minds. As soon as I say the beloved's belly, the beloved's belly is a shuddering heap of wheat. And then the author tried to say, does the belly reminds of the belly dance? Or maybe to the other extreme, the author says, can you feel it is the male's fantasy of consummation which result into the pregnancy? Or that is as a source of blessing? Or the heap of wheat a symbol of good harvest. Go into the field and you see the metaphorical presentation of the heap of the harvest, the grains which is put it as accumulated. And by seeing that one, the metaphorical presentation of the human sexuality and the intimacy which is tried to be connected, which leads to the source of blessing and also the community's survival through another season. So if we look at with the imagery of the metaphorical presentation, exactly go into the field and see a good harvest, that gives you an idea of there is a grain for the next cultivation. The grain can be kept for the seeds for the next season. And also the grains, the good harvest can be used for the human beings and also for the earth community for their survival. It's a future of the community's survival. But when you see it from the perspective of the human sexuality, it's also connected with the idea of a source of blessing. There are many imageries are given in detail. Kindly take time and read on that article. So all imageries in the song, in the Song of Songs, exist in relationship to each other. So in the natural imagery, earth plays a vital role. And the three main uses of the natural imagery are, first one is earth as a location. In the Song of Songs, earth takes the role, that is, earth is a location. That means earth as a metaphor for the love object and also earth as an index of power. Three main things. First one, earth as a location. When we say location, now we know the struggle and the fight which happens in the world today. The fight between in the war in Ukraine. Where do we place the location of the people who are victimized? The victims of the war. What is the location of it? So here, what Fontaine is trying to explain is earth as the location. The location for whom? The location for two people whom is identified looking for a safer place for their private intimacy. So which is the place normally known for the private intimacy? It may be the family, it may be the inner chamber of the house, and we can picturize with the imagination of our Indian context of it, where the materializing of the marriage and the weddings and then the inner chambers in the house. Where do the two persons who look for the personal or the private intimacy? So therefore, the Fontaine says within the Song of Songs, the presentation of the earth community, what is given is earth as a location, earth as a private space. And in that private space, the first identification is the persons who are looking for the intimacy, they find a refuge. In the earth as a location, they find a refuge. That means earth and its geographical features stand as the backdrop for the drama of privacy. That is the cost of lovers, because they are constantly exposed to the community. They are neither married nor betrothed. The beloved longs to take her lover to her mother's inner chamber. The lover or the male voice expresses through nature imageries the appreciation and the frustration of the inaccessibility of the beloved. The personal intimacy between the two persons, where the disappointments, the frustrations of not able to reach out because they found themselves as the refuge. And therefore, the metaphors used is the lily among the brambles. The woman is identified as the lily among the brambles, or locked garden, sealed fountain. She dwells in the garden, unseen, and he yearns for her sight and for her voice. The cultural code demands the male family members to guard the chastity of the female family members before marriage and enforce their fidelity after it. The young lovers know the heated frustration, and as they have no place, they turn to the earth as a shelter and as a refuge. Then, in their secret attempt to see each other, the sheep pastures, or the mountains of Lebanon, or the fields, or the nuts orchards, and the garden are the symbols and also the real metaphors, but in the earth community, they are the real natural elements. The first place as a location and where it's tried to look for as a refuge. The second element as earth's location is workplace. The hidden growing places of earth are the best places for lovers. The venue of the land are the human workplace. In the Song of Songs, the workplace does not give the picture of Edenic garden in Genesis. Instead, demands the continuous human partnership with the land. The linking of food and love is an imagery presentation where the love is nourishing and it requires ongoing cultivation on part of the humans, ongoing participation on part of the human being. Earth as a location, it can be a refuge or as a workplace. The second aspect of the nature imagery is earth as a metaphor for love object. Earth as a metaphor for love object. The typical genre of the love poetry is the descriptive fascination of the features and the qualities of the love object, which discloses him or her as lovable. The portrayal of girl and the description of boy are seen. It's clearly given in the article with very emotional, erotic sense of explanations. Therefore, kindly look onto the article and see that how the portrayal of girl and the description of the boy is given with a love object which can arouse the sense of erotic or the sexuality. The imagery of senses which perceive and enjoy all the earth has to offer. That means the taste, tasting, eating, drinking serves as the cover metaphors for sexual consummation. The tasting, eating, and drinking, which serves as the cover metaphors for sexual consummation, as Brenner writes. Some critics have presented the gender code, the distribution of natural imagery between the sexes. Earth as a metaphor for the loved ones. The third element is earth as a sign or index of power. Earth as a sign or index of power. When they look into it, there are three signs or three index. Index means pointing towards the power. It can be vegetal, or it can be animal, or elemental. So in the vegetal links of power, the author talks about the produce of growing seasons as a sign that the love story is celebrated there within the context of rich fruitfulness. I would like to just put a pause for one moment and try to see how I try to see this imagery is placed over there. And I know there are some plants, sometimes it is the smell of the jasmine flower for some of the people. It gives a very different picturization. The smell of agarbatti, which gives the different picturization for people. For some, it is the different smell and the taste, and also sometimes there are some plants which bloom around 12 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock, and people say that this gives the sensual arousal of the to the people. So it has the element of the natural element in the universe, in the earth, which tries to play a major role in the relationship of the private intimacies. And therefore, these metaphorical presentations are very clearly explained earth as the main source within the Song of Songs. So in the vegetal links of power, the author talks about the produce or the product of the growing seasons as a sign that the love story is celebrated there within the context of rich fruitfulness. In the Song of Songs, lilies are associated with nourishing breast, milk, wine, oil, and species, and the spices are associated with male and female sexual juices. Produce or product or yield of earth always signifies the power of life to reproduce itself. There is also further explanation talks about the imagery of green couch, the pastoral field where the lovers express their private intimacy. Then there is also a fertile tree. And there is also a reference about the wall and the door. You know, the imageries which express there, the wall is referring to the closed area where the people are, the lover is not able to get accessibility to the person. But when it is the door, it represents the continuous communication between the people in their intimacies. Kindly read the detailed explanation in the articles. So the challenge is raised there. The female sexuality is seen from the point of honor and shame, then overwhelming the power of life. This explanation is given in comparison with when it is the wall, which is for an Indian context where the family wants to protect the female sexuality and the privacy of the person, but then which is considered to be a social cultural norm of protection. But when it is said it as a door, because if the wall is turned to a door, it is opened, then it is a shame to the community or to the family. But if it is protected, the woman is protected, the loved one is protected, then it is a reference to it is an honor. But if that is broken, then it is an idea of shame. So what within this private intimacy explained within the Song of Songs, where this fondant try to explain with the idea of ecological as well as the feminist concerns, where try to see that it is the overwhelming power of life has to be overemphasized, the vegetal power and its expositions. Earth as a sign or index of power. The first one is vegetal. Second one, the animal links of power. When we read the Song of Songs, it gives an idea that the foxes has come into the vineyard. The persons who are looking for the private intimacy, they found a shelter and refuge in the location of earth as the vineyard, as a comforting place, and there they see the presence of fox. And the argument which is placed in the article is with a normal parable where the fox is always identified with the taste for grapes and trying to get over the proverbs and the olden stories. But then it is also presented as a kind of the spoilers of the love garden. The vineyard is considered to be a place of love garden, and the presence of the fox or the vessels, these things are considered to be the elements which destroy the love garden vineyard. It represents the possibility of competition and plunder. Blossoming vine are the signs of the power of life, and the foxes are presented as the power of death. But the earth reading suggests that the foxes are no more an element of death. Instead, it is the foxes are feeding. Foxes feeding is the sign of the ongoing circle of life. No more it is a destruction, no more it is a negative element. Instead, it is the sign of ongoing circle of life. Farmers' cultivations are intended to for a broader distribution, not just meant for the few, but it is meant for the broader distribution. In the earth-based reading, the gentle, fertile creatures of the field are considered adequate and fitting signs of divine power in the context of oath taking. Why do the fox is considered to be a positive element? Because when the oath is taken, they have earlier used in the name of Yahweh, in the name of the Lord of hosts. And also there you will see the animals' names are used. So by looking into this one, they says in the oath taking, it is the fertile creatures of the field. The earth-based reading, the gentle, fertile creatures of the field are considered adequate and fitting signs of the divine power. In the context of oath taking, that means it is written in the book as a sacrosanct. In the solemn oath taking, in the name of Yahweh, in the name of the Lord of the host, there the animals' names are also used, therefore it is fitting. In the earthly song, the singer turns to the creatures of the earth to empower the desires. In the earthly song, the singer turns to the creatures of the earth to empower the desires. The third element is elemental links of power, or in other words, earthly links. The elemental images of earth, that is wind, fire, and water, are used as the sign of power of the life forces of the earth. This is a symbolic presentation of the wheel of growth, death, and rebirth. It's a symbolic presentation of the wheel of growth, death, and the rebirth. The celestial elements are also integrated into the Song of Songs. There is a reference about the sun, moon, and all these elements are incorporated in the intimacy of relationship, and it is explained further. In page number 140 of the article, there is given the 5 important points for your further reading as a summary to look into it and to kind of, it's a very simple language which is explained as compared to the rest of the information in the article. Then it's also suggested for a new reading, which can also have a simple language. You can find time and to look on it. I will move on to the Hendrik Vivaldis, who tried to explain about the echo delights in the Song of Songs. What is an echo delight in the Song of Songs? What the Hendrik Vivier tries to explain the echo delight is the interaction between the lovers and the nature as kin. The interaction between the lovers and the nature as kin. This delight is reciprocal. The human delight in the nature and vice versa, and together they celebrate the goodness of life. We will analyze the topic with 3 four major aspects. That means the first one, how do the people of Israel view the nature? How do the people of Israel view the nature? The people of Israel view the nature as the Israel-nature relationship is a distant relationship, clearly derived from imitating their transcendent creator. It is often understood as a master-servant relationship in which the plants and animals have an utilitarian function. There is a wide gap between these two. How do the people of Israel observe the nature? They always try to see with the point of master-servant relationship, where the plants and animals are seen from the perspective of utilitarian function. Nature is seen as tools or property in the hands of humans than their partners. Humans not the creators of the nature, so they cannot break it, but as stewards, they harness, control, and utilize it. The discussion on stewardship as to save and take care of was often overruled by the idea of the rule and dominion in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, 27, and 28. Humans' main focus was to build up their relationship with the divine and their fellow human beings, and therefore nature was not the main concern. If we put a triangular or a hierarchical picture, then the human's focus is always onto the God, and then to look onto the creation or to the earth only from the utilitarian point of view, and also to see as it is a survival tool and a didactic tool for the human beings. The second aspect which Vivier tries to explain is earth as home. Earth as home. John F. Hodge says the cosmology has been guilty of promoting cosmic homelessness. Hodge says the cosmology has been guilty of promoting the cosmic homelessness. We do not see Earth as a home. Instead, we try to rebuild on it. The majority of the religions teach that the humans are strangers on the earth. They have given in detail about each religion, Buddhism, Christianity, and the other traditions. Kindly read on. Humans are the strangers on the earth. And so therefore, we are on a pilgrimage to heaven. So human tries to leave the earth, and our focus is on to the heaven and also about the future life. In this context, the Song of Songs play a major role, because the Song of Songs have a very strong, powerful teaching. It is not the human made the homes or the constructions or the buildings or the thinking about the future of heaven. Instead, the earth itself is a beautiful home for the people who are looking for the private intimacy and for a place. It gives the shelter, it gives the refuge, it gives the sentiments of all what we needed to carry out the smell, taste, and the sense of togetherness and the kin relationship. And therefore, here there is a reference which Vivier is trying to say. The reference to the mother's house is a favorite domain of intimacy. Within the biblical text, the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament, we see it is always a reference to father's house that is considered to be the ultimate family. But there are only two occurrences where we see, I think it's three occurrences where we see the mother's house. And this is what we see in the Song of Songs, which is considered to be the place of the private space. It's a favorite domain of intimacy. And in the Song of Songs, it says the girl comes back to the below of the apple tree, or to the below of the tree where She identifies this place as the place where her mother conceived her. She identifies this place as the place, in spite of loneliness, in spite of all disturbances, when they are able to come to the togetherness, they identify the earth place as the place where below the tree is considered to be the place which is the place of her mother's conceiving place. So that is where it is just the biblical verse as it is in the Song of Songs. Kindly take time and to read on it. So we will try to focus on to the mother's house, and normally it is the father's house. But here the female voice is heard and it subverts the patriarchy. The mother's house is presented as an interior space comfortable for love making. But in the Song of Songs, the open, cultivated, natural space like a garden, vineyard, orchards, and pastures are more home for their lovemaking. In other words, it presents the metaphor of rural retreats or an ideal of the pastoral or agricultural setting. The city is identified as dehumanized, alienated environment than the rural setting. Let me repeat that. It is a kind of statement where the artificial making of the places for the love making, which is compared with the places of the rural retreat centers, that is the gardens, vineyards, orchards, and the pastures fields. And that is the places which Song of Songs continue to reaffirm. In Song of Songs chapter 2 verse 9, there is a reference to home. That means home with its wall. This is also referred in the Fontaine's article as wall and the windows and the doors. Home with its wall, windows, and lattice symbolizes the father's or brother's home. That means it is locked in position or in a social prison. So she must exchange the home for a better, and it is the nature. Images and metaphors used in lovemaking use the elements of nature. Lover offers a new life on and in companionship with this new earth and its inhabitants. Nature shows a new face and spreads a sense of the nature. Home is safe and a comfortable place where warmth, ease, familiarity, and safety is expected. So that lovers identified all that feelings in the nature. There is a retreat from the culture to the nature. The domestic and wild imageries and metaphors are used in nature to express the change of natural place as heaven. The presence of wild animals does not hamper the life of women. Instead, nature is identified as the paradise where life-giving elements are abundant. The lover not only delights in her for momentary love, but also celebrate her as the symbol of life. She is the source of life and its home, and it is his home or paradise. The earth community identifies in this paradise a perfect harmony between the genders. This paradise, that is the earth, the place of vineyard, the orchards, the earth as a place, as a paradise, the perfect harmony between the genders here than in the Genesis account. A detailed comparison is given between the Genesis chapter 3 and with the Song of Songs in that context in the article. In the Song of Songs, humans, plants, and animals are kin, and love is the key to unlock the life. And love is the key to unlock the life. Earth is identified as the best home for the people, for all members, that is people, human beings, plants, animals, and all elements of the organisms. The third aspect is interconnectedness of humans, nature, and earth as kin. The explanations given there, I'm not going to repeat out there. The metaphors, images, and the personifications present in the Song of Songs show the interconnectedness of human and the nature. There is an emphatic bond. There is an emphatic bond all inhabitants of the land possess. The fourth element is the mystical aspect of the nature. The religions talk about the human experience of integrating and transcending experiences. The creation of the cosmos out of chaos is a transcending experience. What calls transcending aspect of religion, not just as the transcending aspect or the experience, but the mystical experience, pointing to some deep mystery beyond the symbols. The gratification of the bodily impulses become transformed into a deep spirituality. This happens in the deep and joyful experiences of the sexual union. The celebration of oneness of body and soul with another leads to heavenly upliftment. In the Song of Songs, the mystical aspect is visible, where animals are divinized. Animals are used in sacrosanct formulas, as I said earlier, in the oath taking. God can be recognized in the animals and in the humans too. God is not named in the Song of Songs, but everywhere to be tested, smelled, heard, seen, and touched. Let me repeat. As compared to the rest of the books, the God is not named in the Song of Songs, but everywhere to be tested, smelled, heard, seen, and touched. A transcendent God is absent from the Song of Songs. So the idea is God is not the world, but God is in the world. God is present in every individual, non-human animals and humans. With the plundered, impoverished, and stripped earth, there can be no deep experience. Let me repeat. With the plundered, impoverished, and stripped earth, there can be no deep experience. Instead, it can be the deep, dark side of the earth. So the humans can never experience the mystical experience without the earth and the environment. The human beings can never experience the mystical experience without the earth or the environment. To conclude, the members of the earth community continue to enrich each other by realizing the home experience. Earth as the kin, exposed in the interconnectedness and with the mystical experience. Earth is the source of life to all the inhabitants, and it is a call to say no to exploitation or greed, and a call to join the joyous celebration of the earth community. Let me repeat, earth is the source of life to all the inhabitants, and it is a call to say no to exploitation and a call to join the joyous celebration of the Earth community. Kindly go through the articles which is given to you and take time to read the Song of Songs. Enjoy the language which is expressed there with the idea of the elements of the Earth community. Enjoying of it in the context of the human physical intimacy. Thank you. Thank you for the patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Leila Vijayan. Today we are celebrating Women's Day. A lady professor took the class and we are very happy.